Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I am here today because we're halfway through the year, and earlier in 2021 I did a video about my most anticipated new releases of the year, most of which were in the first half of 2021. So I wanted to do a follow-up now that we're halfway through, looking ahead to fall and winter, and talk about some books that I am really looking forward to in the second half of 2021. I will link the original video down below. I will also have a couple of other things in the description box that you might want to check out for further information or further viewing, whatever. I will do a bit of a check-in on my most anticipated reads for the first half of the year in my Friday Reads video this week, where I'll talk about how many of those books I have managed to read so far and all of that. So stay tuned and we'll cover that. Before we get into the new most anticipated list, I want to mention the 3 books from the previous video for 2021 that have not been released yet, one of which is no longer a 2021 release. But the first 2 are still coming out. That's Harlem Shuffle by Colson, Whitehead, and Fight Night by Miriam, Toews. Harlem Shuffle is coming out on September 14th. Fight Night is coming out October 5th. I am still looking forward to both of them, and I will not be talking about them in this video because I talked about them in the last video. So if you want more about them, please check out that video. The other one that I had mentioned was Jennifer Egan's book, which at the time was called The Thing That Changes Everything. And it appears that it has now been moved to 2022, and the title has changed to The Candy House, because I can no longer find anything about a Jennifer Egan book called The Thing That Changes Everything. So I'm assuming that they are the same book. It just changed titles, and it is now going to be published in 2022. It's sort of a spiritual sister to A Visit from the Goon Squad. That still sounds exciting to me. However, it is no longer a 2021 release, so we'll be revisiting it at some point in the future. There are at least 3 releases that are coming out later this year that I feel like I should address, even though I'm not excited about them. So I won't be talking about these 3 books in this video, other than right now to just kind of shrug in their general direction. Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney, which is coming out September 7th. I know a lot of people are excited about this. I had a sort of mixed response to conversations with friends, and I started Normal People not long after that and decided I really needed more time, and I still need a little bit more time before I think about diving into another Sally Rooney book. And if I do, I still have Normal People on my bookshelf, so if I get to the new one at all, it won't be anytime soon. And Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr, which is coming out September 28th. You would think I would be really excited about the next book from the guy who won Pulitzer Prize for All the Light We Cannot See, which is a book that by all rights I should not like. It has a lot of things in it that I usually don't like in a book. However, I loved it. But looking at the plot description of Cloud Cuckoo Land has me really confused. I'm basically that thoughtful face emoji about it, and I am not convinced I want to read it. So I'm not going to include it here. Maybe when reviews come out, I'll end up revisiting, but I'm certainly not anticipating it, certainly not really looking forward to it in any way. Sorry. And then the final one is Jonathan Franzen. I feel like I need to acknowledge him, but I have never finished a Jonathan Franzen book that I started. I tried to read 2 of his books, didn't finish either one of them, and at this point, I'm pretty sure he's just not somebody I would like to follow, and I'm not excited to read his new book at all. Now let's get into the actual list of books that I am looking forward to in the latter half of 2021. I've divided this into 2 sections because I'm a little bit hesitant to add a bunch of books to my most anticipated list because I'm keeping track of my progress on them. But there are a lot of books that I'm keeping my eye on and I'm still looking forward to. So I have a maybe section, which we're going to talk about first. And then I have a section of books that I am all in on and really can't wait to read. Let's start with the maybes. We're going to go by release date. So I'll start with the ones that are going to be releasing first, and then we'll go on through the calendar year. You know how calendars work. So that's all I really need to say about that. The first one is A Song Everlasting by Ha Jin. This is coming out this month, July 27th. It is published by Pantheon. I have loved several of Ha Jin's books, War Trash and Ocean of Words most of all, but I also enjoyed Waiting a great deal. I've also been indifferent to some of his recent work, most significantly the book A Map of Betrayal. I just really didn't like that at all. So I'm approaching this one, which is about a Chinese singer who is separated from his homeland when he accidentally sings at an event sponsored by people who support Taiwanese secession, with caution. It could be good, but I'm holding out for some reviews before I really make a decision about whether or not this is something I would like to prioritize to fit in this year. The next maybe is Cuyahoga by Beatty, which is published on September 7th, and it will be published by Scribner. This book is something that I feel like I would immediately jump on if I were 20 years old right now, because it's exactly the type of book I would have loved then. And because it is the type of book that would have grabbed my interest then, I am intrigued by it. But I feel like my taste has changed a lot, and maybe it's not a book for me anymore. But it was, so I'm still intrigued. We'll see. It is about a Paul Bunyan-esque character named Big Son in Ohio, and it sounds wild, like all caps, wild. The thing that really convinced me to put it on the maybe pile is a starred review in Kirkus that ends with this line: an improbable, downright preposterous yarn, ably spun, and a great entertainment for a time in need of laughter. That is kind of what led me back to thinking that this might be something I would be interested in. So I am going to wait a little bit, see what reviews look like once it comes out. Maybe it will end up getting some award traction. Pete Beatty, by the way, sounded like an author that I was familiar with, and yet when I looked him up, I didn't see any previous books of his, and then it turns out he's a debut author. I don't know why I have deja vu with his name, but I do. So I'm going to wait, see what the reviews look like when it comes out. It is already listed at my library. It obviously hasn't been released yet, but I did slap a hold on it, and we'll see what happens when it becomes available. Again, it will be published on September 7th. The next one is Competing with Idiots, Herman and Joe Mankiewicz, a dual portrait by Nick Davis. This is coming out on September 14th from Knopf. If you know me, you know that I love Hollywood stories. I'm not really intrigued by Hollywood. I don't know that I would want to work in Hollywood or live in Hollywood or anything like that. I used to spend a couple of weekends now and then in LA when I lived in San Francisco. And when I was 19 years old, somebody told me that I should start Botox immediately. And I don't really want to live in a place like that. But I am fascinated by Hollywood stories. And this is about two legends of old Hollywood. The Mankiewicz brothers helped create some of the most legendary films of all time, including Citizen Kane and All About Eve. All About Eve is one of my all-time favorite movies. And this is the story of how each of them came to Hollywood, became a success, and eventually fell apart. And it is written by Herman's grandson. The only reason I'm putting this in the maybe pile is that I've found that I tend to jump on books like this, Hollywood books and things like that, and then they sit on my shelf for a while, and then I end up getting to them much later. So I am interested in reading this book, but looking at my past history, it feels like this is something I'm more likely to get to in the long term, and therefore would not really be jumping on when it is released. And a good example of this is Karina Longworth's book about Howard Hughes called Seduction. I bought that immediately when it was published, still haven't read it. It's been over a year, possibly even 2 years at this point. So this could end up in the same camp, but I am really interested in getting to it at some point. The next one, which I really wrestled with because I wanted to put it on the list of things that I'm all in on, but the premise of it just sounds bizarre enough that I feel like it needs to be in the maybe pile. It's the book of Form and Emptiness by Ruth Ozeki. This is going to be published September 21st by Viking. The moment this was described as a cousin to Ozeki's last novel, which was A Tale for the Time Being, I kind of knew I was in, but then I read the plot description of it, and it sounds very bizarre, which worries me. It follows Benny O, who begins to hear voices following the death of his musician father. This leads him to the library, where the voices are naturally hushed, because you can't talk loudly in a library. And he meets a book that narrates his life and teaches him to listen to the things that matter. This is almost a Cloud Cuckoo Land thing. I think the only thing that's keeping it from being exactly a Cloud Cuckoo Land deal, where I am not excited about it at all, is that I really enjoyed A Tale for the Time Being. And even though I really enjoyed All the Light We Cannot See, The new book by Anthony Doerr is not like a cousin or a spiritual sister or anything like that to All the Light We Cannot See. This is kind of described as a cousin of the book that I really liked. And I think Ruth Ozeki is an author who kind of has bizarre qualities in her plotting and her writing, and that's part of the appeal. So there's still a chance that even though the plot sounds really weird to me, it could work. And part of me really wants to trust Ruth Ozeki, and part of me really wants to wait and see. So we're going to see what happens when this is released on September 21st. The next one is Taste My Life Through Food by Stanley Tucci. This is published October 5th by Gallery Books. My husband and I have been enjoying Stanley Tucci's CNN show, in which he travels Italy and talks about the food history and the food politics of each region of Italy. It's interesting to me for a lot of reasons. One, I'm really interested in food politics. Two, I am really into food since I met my husband. And three, we really want to go to Italy at some point. So getting to know all the different regions is just kind of fun for us. But anyway, this book feels like a pretty solid extension of that experience. And at the end of the day, there's also the fact that Stanley Tucci is a stone cold fox. Yes, there's that. Sometimes I'm shallow. It's okay. So sue me. Fun fact for you. I once worked at the Barnes & Noble in Union Square for the holidays, and I saw him. I was working the information desk on the first floor, and he was just stepping onto the escalator, which is next to the information desk, to head up to a different floor. And it was all I could do to stop myself from running up the escalator after him. That is a true story. So yes, I will read his book. We also have a copy of his cookbook, which I don't think we've actually used, but does have some really interesting recipes in it. The final book on my maybe pile is Watergate, A New History by Garrett M. Graff. This will be published on November 2nd by Avid Reader Press. The reason I'm really interested in this one is that Garrett M. Graff emotionally traumatized me with his last book, The Only Plane in the Sky, An Oral History of 9/11. And even though it traumatized me, I really deeply respect the work that he did and put into that book and the really thorough picture that he created of everything that happened on that day. That book is a really great snapshot of what 9/11 felt like to experience if you were alive and following the news at the time. And because of that thoroughness, I'm really interested in what he has to say about Watergate. Even though Watergate is a subject that has really been done to death, it still remains interesting to me because I feel like it is a really pivotal moment in American history over the last century, and we are still dealing with a lot of the repercussions of Richard Nixon's presidency. So I would be very interested in seeing what Garrett M. Graff has to say about it, but I don't think it's anything I'm going to be prioritizing by the end of the year. So those are my maybes. Now let's get to the books that I am all in on, really excited about. We'll be snapping a copy up as soon as I possibly can. And again, we will be doing this chronologically, so I'm going to talk about the books that will be published first, and then we'll move to the ones that will be published latest in the year. The first one is Run, Book 1 by John Lewis. This is going to be published August 3rd by Abrams Comic Arts. This follows up on the successful March trilogy about John Lewis's time as an activist in the civil rights movement. Run, Book 1, picks up where that series left off and follows Lewis's pivot from activism into politics, which is a really interesting progression because he was seen as a radical activist during the civil rights movement, and he eventually became a politician. It also deals with the Voting Rights Act, which has been gutted recently, so this should be a very timely and kind of painful book to read. Now, it is noted that Lewis completed this book before his death, but I can't find any information about when Book 2 will be released and if he also managed to finish that before he died. So I feel like there are some kind of question marks about the next few books in this series. I'm assuming it would be intended to be a trilogy like the March books were. But whatever it ends up being, I really loved the March books, and I would love to see Lewis's story continue in that form. Really looking forward to that one. The next one is In the Country of Others by Leila Slimani. This is being published on August 10th by Penguin. I have enjoyed Slimani's other novels, The Perfect Nanny and Adele. Both of them use the format of a thriller. to tell a dramatic story and hint at a lot of larger sort of political issues. That has me really excited for this book, which follows an interracial love story about a French woman who falls in love with a Moroccan soldier after World War II, but struggles to adapt to her new home. It also traces the tensions that would ultimately lead to Morocco's independence in 1956, setting the stage for an exploration of settlers versus natives and women fighting for their emancipation in a world of men. Sign me up. I am looking forward to that. The next title that I am all in for is All In, an autobiography by Billie Jean King. This will be published on August 17th by Knopf. And yes, it is the title that inspired this section of my most anticipated books to be called All In and not anything else. Now, I am not a huge sports enthusiast, but I am a sometime tennis fan, and Billie Jean King is one of my favorite athletes and one of the few that I would absolutely fanboy over if I ever saw them in person. Ida Williams' sister would be another example of that. So this autobiography promises to detail her battle against sexism in athletics, including the famous Battle of the Sexes with Bobby Riggs, and her path to becoming an LGBTQ activist and icon. I mean, how could I resist that? I am so in. The next book that I am all in for is The Magician by Colm Tóibín, which is going to be published September 7th by Scribner. I have never read one of Colm Tóibín's books, and this novel is perhaps an interesting starting point for me because I've also never read anything by Thomas Mann. However, I find myself really intrigued by the premise. It follows Thomas Mann as he grows up with a conservative father, becomes a celebrated writer with a family, and ultimately flees Germany to escape Hitler and the Nazis. And I feel I should point out this is a subject that Britta Böhler herself also covered in her novel, The Decision. Do with that information as you wish. You can check out her profile for more information about that. As an added bonus, I was granted access to this book on NetGalley and will be reading it soon. So I'm really excited to dive into Colm Tóibín's work and get to know him a little bit as a writer, because I have another one of his books and I just haven't gotten around to reading it. I only got it recently, but he is an author I consistently hear really good things about, so this is a good excuse to dive into his work. The next title I am all in on in 2021 is Please Don't Sit on My Bed Within Your Outside Clothes, Essays by Phoebe Robinson. This is published September 28th by Tiny Reparations Books. Phoebe was one half of one of my favorite podcasts, Two Dope Queens, which does not exist anymore. Well, it exists. You can still find it. They just don't do new episodes of it, which always breaks my heart. It was a comedy podcast, and their focus was amplifying comedians who have stories that are not traditionally shared. Minority groups, lots of female comedians, things like that. It was a fantastic podcast. Phoebe Robinson has written 2 essay collections before. The first one was You Can't Touch My Hair, and the other one was Everything's Trash, But It's Okay. I enjoyed both of them, even though I thought they were slightly uneven. She also just started her own publishing imprint, Tiny Reparations, which is part of Penguin Random House, and I love that. I will put a link to more information about Tiny Reparations books down below. It's something I definitely want to support by buying her book and reading it and sharing it with you people. So hopefully we can get it trending, which is something she would absolutely say. The next book I am all in on is Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World by Benjamin Alire Sáenz. This will be published by Simon & Schuster on October 12th. I read Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe a while ago at the recommendation of a friend of mine named Jessica, who is a young adult librarian and who has impeccable taste. I don't think she's watching this, but she does. It's true. She also introduced me to a lot of really good music. I worked with her at Borders before she became a YA librarian, and I was young and foolish and listened to terrible music, and she made me a CD. That's how long ago this was. It was somewhere around 2001, 2002. She made me a CD called Music You Might Have Missed, that the whole point of which was to introduce me to better music, and it worked. My music taste changed almost overnight. So Jessica has brought a lot of really good things to my life, including Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. So the fact that I loved that book so much naturally means I'm looking forward to the sequel, in which our protagonists try to build a life and relationship that can withstand the slings and arrows of the world at large. My husband actually just listened to Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe on audio. The audio is read by Lin-Manuel Miranda. I had been saying that I want to reread that book before I read the sequel, and I think the audio is clearly going to be the way I go, because Lin-Manuel Miranda. Come on. I really hope he reads the audio of this one. I might do this one that way if he does. So very excited for that book. We have 2 more books on my all-in list. The next to last one is Monster in the Middle by Tiffany Unique. This will be published on October 19th by Riverhead. This book first came to my attention when Brandon Taylor gushed about it. I believe it was on Twitter. He just sang its praises, and he had a lot of really nice things to say about Tiffany Unique. That got me to look at this book more closely, and looking more closely had me extremely interested to read it. It is about how a modern couple's romance is influenced by their individual family histories. And if you know me at all, you know I am fascinated by the concept of generational trauma, and I tend to like books that reflect generational trauma. So this was an instant addition to my TBR once I realized that. And it's going to be interesting to see how these family histories, especially the traumas that they have in them and the difficult things that their families have gone through, impact who they are and who they love and all of that stuff. I'm really looking forward to this book. The final book that I am all in for is The Sentence by Louise Erdrich. This will be published on November 9th by Harper. Fresh off of her Pulitzer Prize victory for The Night Watchman, Louise Erdrich is back to appeal to my interest in generational trauma, just like the last book. This is a very complicated premise. Bear with me. It is the story of an Ojibwe woman named Tucci who gets a job in an independent bookstore in Minneapolis after she gets out of prison, where she has been for several years. From there, a customer's stubborn ghost, yes, you heard that correctly, leads Tucci to a shocking personal discovery with historical implications, and Tucci's flirtation with the tribal police officer who sent her to prison asks them both to overcome betrayal and learn to trust each other. Sounds wildly complicated, but if there's any author who can pull that off, it's Louise Erdrich. She specializes in novels that have a sort of wide-ranging cast of characters, each telling parts of a story and giving you an overall picture, sort of like a quilt, which is particularly interesting because the cover of this book looks like a quilt. And I thought the best part of The Night Watchman, which I was not really thrilled by, dealt with the female character, so I'm really glad that the center of this book is a female character. She also has a tendency to center books around some sort of crime, so I think the fact that it is about a woman who has been in prison seems to be in her wheelhouse. I have not been in love with her 2 most recent books, La Rose and The Night Watchman, but I have really deeply loved some of her other work. The Roundhouse Plague of Doves is fantastic. I need to reread that book at some point because somebody read it. I think it was Lindsay from Lindsay's Book Life had read it last year and asked me a bunch of questions about it, and I found that I didn't remember a lot of the plot details. So I need to get back to A Plague of Doves, but I remember loving it. So because I really love those previous books, because this taps into interests of mine that still exist, I am definitely still all in on Louise Erdrich's new book. So those are the titles that I am most looking forward to in the latter half of 2021. I would love to hear what you're looking forward to. If you have thoughts about any of these books, recommendations based on any of these books. If you disagree and you're really excited about Jonathan Franzen, good for you. Let me know about it in the comment section down below. I don't mean that to sound mean. Legitimately, good for you. It's good to be excited about things. So let's talk about what you're looking forward to in the second half of 2021 in the comment section down below. As always, I really appreciate your time, especially if you follow along on whatever it is I do here. Stay tuned for a recap of how I've been doing on my most anticipated reads of 2021 in my Friday Reads video this week. And I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.